Richard, thank you for that gracious introduction, and thank you all for giving up on a morning to talk about public policy. It's incredibly impressive to see the array of people here today. Air Products reminds me of my days back on City Council. Some of you may not know, but I was on the Chandler City Council from 1983 to 1992.
That's when we first started.
That's right. And one of the things I came to realize is as important as Intel was, Air Products was maybe even more important, because Intel can't exist without Air Products. And also that Air Products was key because they had the pipeline to the expansion of the semiconductor capacity here in Arizona. So I would really, let's give a round of applause to Air Products for being a key part of this. What I want to do this morning, I want to do three things. Number one, I want to talk a little bit about the state of Arizona, where we're at educationally in general. I want to talk about the specific 3 school districts that we have here this morning because they are some incredible leaders. And then finally, I want to talk about strategies for how we improve ourselves. So first, to talk about where Arizona is right now, we have some raw statistics that we can talk about. And often you see in the paper, you'll usually see rankings from 46th through 50th from various things. But the truth be known that when you take a look at the data in a little more detailed fashion, that's not what emerges. And in fact, we recently, there's been a national movement to making graduation rate data more comparable on an apples-to-apples basis. And they've been doing a lot of work on this because there's been a lot of data problems. When that data came out, and I was looking at that, we ranked number 8th in the nation in our African American graduation rate. We ranked number 15th across the nation in our graduation rate for low-income students. We ranked 18th in both our Caucasian and Hispanic graduation rate. The one downfall we have, and I'm going to refer to this a number of times today, is in our Native Americans. And among Native Americans, we were among the 33 states that publish data, that have large enough population to publish data. We were almost dead last. And that has been one of the enduring tragedies in Arizona, is our failure to provide the opportunities to our Native American population that we provide in many other areas. And we see that in a lot of different places. So we see that there with graduation rate data. But as important as graduation rate data is, it doesn't tell you about the academic gains of our students. And again there, the thing that we try to do as a department is to go in and find out with a profound knowledge what the real facts are. And so when you talk about how Arizona schools are performing, what you have to do is you have to have benchmarks to compare with other states. And the gold standard for those benchmarks is the National Assessment of Educational Progress. And when you look at the National Assessment of Educational Progress, you have raw data, but then you have some really good institutions that are looking at that data with great science and saying, on an apples-to-apples basis, let's compare the schools using the NAEP data. And when you do that, an entirely different picture emerges. We do have enormous challenges. We have the challenges of Native Americans and many students coming from low-income minority populations. But when you sort that out and compare apples-to-apples basis, the most recent study we have ranks our Arizona schools 20th in the nation. And that's not anywhere near 50th. But let me assure you, ladies and gentlemen, it's nowhere near acceptable. Because 20th in the nation in our schools, and you have to really think about this, it took me a long time analyzing this data to fully understand this, only brings our students up to 42nd. Our goal has to be number 1 and number 1 by a chunk. And that's what we need to do if we're going to bring our students up from 42nd up into the top 10 of the nation. So we really almost need a revolution in education in order to pull that off. Now, one of the things I would like is if they would update that ranking. You would think that with all the billions of dollars spent on education statistics and everything, that we would be able to get a very scientific ranking of our state and where our schools compare. But that data from the RAND Corporation is now 10 years old. 10 years old. And so I've been pressing the West Group to update that study. My belief is that in fact, we're going to show for a number of reasons that Arizona's not going to be ranked 20th. My guess is we'll be somewhere between 17th and 14th in the nation. But guess what? Again, it's not nearly good enough. And one of the challenges that we have in this state is that we now, for the very first time, we are a majority minority student population. The majority of our students now come from minority households. And it's a huge change. And that challenge is going to increase every single year. So our schools have to do better and better every single year just to stay even. And that is not going to be easy. Back in the mid-90s, I went through an enormous amount of work to track down the #1 superintendent in the state, the superintendent who had the highest academic gains. And it happened to be an inner city school district in Phoenix called Creighton. And so I went and analyzed that school district. They had the highest academic gains in the state. Their test scores went down every single year. And at the end of that 4 years, that superintendent, just an incredible leader, lost his job. That's how tough these demographic challenges can be. And that's what we have to do to rise to the challenge, to understand the nature of the full challenge that we're facing. It's even more extreme with our Native American populations. What they have found is it's not just a question of poverty. They have found it's a question of the breadth of poverty, the depth of poverty, not just what percentage of your students live below the poverty line, but which percentage of your students live below 50% of the poverty line. And it's not just that, it's also the dislocation of the poverty. I've been spending, because my success as a superintendent depends on success in the Native American school districts, I've been spending a lot of time traveling out to the Native American school districts and schools. To get up to Kayenta, I think it was like a 6-hour drive. So I've been up there 3 times. So just to get up there, and not just Kayenta, traveling to schools across the Navajo Indian Reservation, down south to Babatibri, to the Apache school districts. And the thing that I'm finding is I expected to go out there and based on the data to see sort of an intellectual desert wasteland, things in complete disarray. But in fact, what we're finding is heroes out there on the serving the Native American populations. Let me give you one example. Clyde McBride is up at Kayenta, and he had a vision years ago. He's an old farmer teaching students, but he had a vision years ago, and he managed to get a superintendent to go along, and they built 2 operating towers, veterinary operating towers, one for large animals, one for small animals. And he's training those students to be veterinary techs. So they do pre-op preparation of the animals, they do operational support, and they do post-op care for the animals. Almost all of the students in that test, over 90%, pass the Ames test, and over half of them get college scholarships. As a result of the attention we were able to bring up there, 5 of them got Gates Millennium Scholarships. A Gates Millennium Scholarship is full ride, everything, from the start of college all the way through to PhD. And we're going to track those young students to see if we can assist them as they move along the process. But it's not just Clyde McBride, it's Terry Gilliam over at Chin Lee. He has these students building complete custom homes. And when I say custom homes, it's a small home, but they're dealing with $400 a gallon paint. And when I walked inside that home, and these students were around me working on that home, it was as though I wasn't even there. They were so focused, they were so engaged on constructing that home that you could probably set off a blast and they would not have wavered. And it was unbelievably impressive. These were electrical systems, plumbing systems, the whole 9 yards. And again, by gripping the students in something that they could engage in, you not only grip them on learning how to build a home, but they were learning mathematics, because there's an enormous amount of mathematics in building a home, and he was also having them do the writing. We call that interdisciplinary, sort of a part of what we call the new Common Core process. So that's our challenge, folks, is to deal and to rise to extraordinary extent as we engage in this endeavor. Now, we have 3 school districts here with us this morning, Kyrene, Tempe, Union, and Chandler. And as I go across the state, I'm reminded just how blessed we are to have these 3 school districts. and how blessed we are to have had the leadership on the school boards that have overseen these 3 school districts, as well as the leadership of the superintendents. Because what I see in many school districts across the state is not what we've experienced. What we've experienced is optimal policy, where a school board, the well-organized school board, acts as a team to support a superintendent, and they keep that superintendent in place for a very extended period of time, and they grow their school district. They grow their teachers, they grow their leaders. And this is what you see. You see not only good school boards and supporting great superintendents, but you see they select principals, and they've supported those principals and grown them over time. As you look at the leaders, it works all in concert. But as I go across our state, what I see is I see factions on school boards that are bickering with each other, and then one faction gets the upper hand, and a superintendent goes out. We have the average length of many of our superintendents is 2 to 3 years in a superintendency. Ladies and gentlemen, you cannot grow a school district, you cannot grow excellence, you cannot create the environments that we need with those kind of activities at the top level. And it's one of the strongest messages I send out there. And one of my things that I'm going to do and do more actively is go out there to be a peacemaker and force these factions to sit down and to stick with a superintendent and grow that superintendent over time. Because as Camille Casteel would tell you, with all the great work that she's done, she stands on the shoulders of giants who came before her. And she's built to much greater heights, but it wasn't done. She came into a culture that she strengthened. And the other superintendents would tell you the same thing, is they came into strong cultures and built them further, and they have a culture of continuous improvement. Now, the other thing you see in the school districts here is you see a more profound knowledge about the nature of education. We, in a sense, sit as board members, the public, because it's public education, the entire population sits as board members and over education. And let me assure you, when it comes to a knowledge of the complexity of education and our knowledge of policy, we're all dumb as rocks. And I don't mean that lightly. The complexity of what these leaders have to deal with, and the complexity at which they go with to deal with this, is very impressive. They don't just track math scores, they don't just track reading scores, they don't just track the cognitive side. What they all understand is the number one predictor of educational success is how well you engage the parents, how well you inspire the students, and how energized that teacher is when they go in every morning. So they track not just the cognitive side of the equation, they're tracking the whole team. All 3 of these school districts do it. It's a much more complex level of engagement. It's something that's been supported by the school boards over time. And so they're just as interested in what percentage of their parents say their child's getting an excellent education as they are in the absolute cognitive result, because they know the two go hand in hand. So and I would like to tell you that as I go across the state, that I see that same level of complexity, and I do see it in a number of other school districts, but we don't see it nearly in all of our school districts at all. And we have to get that level of complexity to come to all of our school districts across the state if we're going to meet the challenges that are posed by our minority populations, our Native Americans, our low-income Hispanic populations that desperately need for us to be at the very top of our game. So one of the things that I do is I try to learn from these superintendents what they're doing, and to propagate it across other school districts across the state, and to let them know when their behavior is excellent, and to affirm it, to go up to places like Clyde McBride and let him know that we think he's a saint and we know that he walks on water. Go up to Terry Gilliam and let him know that he's doing a phenomenal job. These people are dealing with very adverse environments, but also to carry the message that education is a complex enterprise, much more difficult than running a private sector business, much more difficult. That's one of the things I've come to realize, and I've been a passionate student of high performance private business almost my whole life. Now, there's another subject that I'd like to cover today, and it's something, it's a change that's coming from the center. And over the last 20 years, I've fashioned a system of education in Arizona that's incredibly decentralized. Unlike other states, the State Board of Education does not choose the textbooks in Arizona. That is done by the school board, that's done by the superintendents. Unlike other states, the State Board of Education does not pick a curriculum. Again, that's done by school boards and superintendents and their internal processes. But what the state board does do is that they set the standards. And they, over about 3 years ago, they brought in a new set of standards. And at the time, it wasn't controversial. And they were called Common Core standards. Now, where did those Common Core standards come from? They came from, essentially, if you wanted to narrow it down to one place, it was an organization called Achieve. And some people that sit on the board of Achieve, you'll recognize their names. Lou Gerstner, who was the CEO of IBM, and Craig Barrett, who was the former CEO of Intel. Craig Barrett is probably the #1 driving force behind the Common Core standards. And Achieve went across the nation and studied all the standards. And they found 2 problems with the standards. Number 1, the standards were too low. So we were doing this to an enormous number of students, saying everything's great, you're on to a prosperous, successful life. But then we found out that the students who were passing those standards, those low standards, were going on to college and immediately going into remediation. Now, do you know what your probability of passing and getting a 4-year degree if you start off in remediation in college? It's pretty close to 0. Low single digits. So we weren't doing the students any favors by giving them that false positive feedback all along the way through their career. We weren't doing their parents any favors. They're going to get stacked up with a lot of college debt without any benefit from it. So number 1, they designed some standards that were higher. But they found a second problem. They found that as a result of the mishmash of standard setting processes, there were 220 days of standards for a good teacher teaching in 180 days. So it was doing damage to the academic process. Teachers were skimming across the subject without ensuring that the students were learning it. So it was doing damage 2 ways. So Achieve designed some new standards that were higher standards. That clearly, if a student passed those standards, they were on to the potential of having success in college. And also, a good teacher could teach those standards in 180 days. And then those standards were rapidly adopted by many states, essentially all the states in the nation. That's where those standards came from. Now, what's been happening is the standards have gotten very controversial. Why did they get very controversial? Because President Obama got behind them and became associated with them. But that wasn't until after the standards were developed by Achieve and by the Council of Chief State School Officers and the governors. So you need to know that. And we feel that those standards are very good standards. Now, one of the things you need with standards is consensus, and we haven't gotten there yet. These standards are very controversial among conservatives. They're now running somebody against me because I refuse to go on an assault against these standards. And that's just part of what you do in these. But I would like to very quickly, just to give you a quick sense, go through 2 standards up here just to show you that these standards aren't the spawn of Satan. So here's a 3rd grade math standard. Fluently multiply and divide within 100 using strategies between, such as the relationship between multiplication and division. So teach a child that knowing that 8 times 5 equals 40, you immediately know that 40 divided by 5 equals 8. And by the end of 3rd grade, know from memory all products of 2 one-digit numbers. Meaning that the child needs to know everything from 2 times 2 equals 4 to 9 win, because there's been this debate about they don't need to know their multiplication tables. They can use a calculator. But the Common Core standard says if you're going to be ready for college, you need to know your multiplication tables. And actually, these standards get a little bit more complex than this, because what they found out is the child can know that 7 times 7 equals 49, but they've actually put children in brain scanners and had them do 7 times 7 equals 49, and they found out that a good chunk of those students were actually using that as a linguistic sequence, that it wasn't even coming from the number side of the brain, and they might be able to say 7 times 7 equals 49. And the standards go past this level and say the child needs to be able to conceptually and test it to know that that's a numerical operation taking place. 7 sets of 7 equal 49 objects. So it is, in my view, these standards reflect the very best of science. And can they be improved? And can we take possession of them as a state? Can we remove the federal influence? Yes, and I intend to do that. But don't be fooled by the barrage of emails These are excellent standards, and they're a good guide for the state, and students who can pass these standards, in fact, at the end will be ready for college and career. And we're going to... So that's what I've done, is give you a little bit of an oversight of where we are as a state. We have huge demographic challenges. Our schools rank somewhere around 20th, perhaps as low as 14th if I can get West Ed to update the studies. And there's no place but number one if we're going to do what we need to do for our minority students. We'd like to give you one last statistic. And Milton Friedman came to Arizona in the mid-90s. And we're number one in the nation by far in school choice. Got 14,000 students in, 145,000 students in charter schools, over 145,000 students choosing schools. The school districts here probably all in excess of 20% of their students coming from outside the district. So they're competing, they're strong competitors too. And I said to Milton, I said, this isn't going to play out the way you thought it is. I said, we're going to see the benefits of school choice in social indicators, and then we'll see it in academics. And I feel like I was right. Over the last 10 years, the percentage of our juveniles who have been arrested has been plunging like a rock. We've gone from 68,000 students being arrested per 1 million in school to 40,000. That's a small city of students not arrested over the last decade. And this started at the beginning of the decade, not when Senate Bill 1070 came around. It has been a slow, steady pace of improvement. And I have felt from the beginning that students being able to establish a new identity, that they might have an identity that's a bad identity, but by the fact that they might fail at one school and go to another one and go to another one, we've seen them go through 5 schools before they set down their roots. And I feel like these benefits are enormous. And we're now seeing that with our adult criminal population. For the very first time, our adult criminal population is dropping in our prisons. So I think we have the best of all worlds here, great leadership in our district system, a good competitive environment that they have to deal with, and a good set of standards for us to bring it all together. Thank you.
Take this opportunity, of course, as one of the sponsors, Carrie, so we can talk a little bit about your schools too. So I am the superintendent of schools for Learning Center Public Schools, which houses 3 schools within its district. We have a charter school in Gilbert, a charter school in Chandler, and a Montessori school in Gilbert. And I did mention we serve over 600 kids, but most notably I want to talk about Fulton Ranch Learning Center, which is here right down the road in the community of Chandler. And Fulton opened up this last year. There was their first year, was an expansion school or a sister school to Santan Learning Center. And Superintendent Huppenthal talks about the A through F, was a champion for the A through F. And schools, when they get these A's, you'll see banners up outside that says, we're an A school, and you never see the C ones, right? They don't put those banners up. But we're an A school, and we do the best. And so I thought, well, our families at Fulton say we don't do a good job tooting our own horn because we like to just kind of serve the community and do our thing and let our actions speak. But we are super excited about Fulton. Fulton in its first year did receive an A letter grading, but more notably than that, they also rank schools within the state as well. And Arizona, Fulton was ranked in the top 20 at number 16 in the state of Arizona for all schools. And then for charter schools, it was ranked number 8 in the state. And that information is right on the ADE's website. So in the first year, Ms. Thompson, who our principal, she's right here with us, her staff kind of hit it right out of the park. And now the challenge is maintaining what you've done, right? So super excited about being a part of Chandler, being a part of Choice. Extremely honored to even be invited to be a part of this illustrious group that's going to talk after me, and the years of knowledge that I am only a pebble in the ocean compared to the knowledge base that these 3 have. But with that, I'll turn it over to any questions that the group might have. I'm going to stay right here.
You got it.
As this thing, blow up.
The charter schools teachers have to have a master's degree in the subject when they teach it. Is that correct?
Charter school teachers have to be highly qualified or have their certifications. That's a choice of the charters. You know, early on in charter school legislation, I mean, there were moms that said, we'll give this a try, and people without degrees and qualifications were teaching, but that certainly has evolved and changed over the years, and now most charter schools that are those A schools or those highly performing schools have teachers that are certified. Master's degree, not necessarily. They just need to have that teacher certification piece.
So the qualifications for the teacher for the charter schools is the same as our public schools?
Well,
or
yeah.
would you say charter schools are a little bit more in-depth and
No, I would say that the district schools probably have a little bit more of a higher standard of which their teachers need to be held to, because charter school teachers can be either highly qualified or hold their certification. And a highly qualified teacher might be somebody who has a bachelor's degree and, let's say, 21 hours in upper level stuff, but it may not be in education itself. Where you guys are shaking your heads, so I must be right on with that. Let's see, look at that. Now look to the knowledge base over here, right, guys? So.
First, I just wanted to say congratulations on being so highly ranked.
No, thank you.
And then also, my question is, what are your percentages for minorities, for low-income students? And then also, how do you address special education?
Good question. Let's address the first question as minority and lower socioeconomic students, maybe. When we first started as a school, we had a very low percentage of minority students and socioeconomic. I would say we fell below 10%. But as we've grown as an organization, our free and reduced, our student population that falls under the lower socioeconomic classification is about 40%. Still not, I mean, there are schools that have 100%, 90%. And then as far as special education, you know, we are a free public school, so like any school, if we have an opening in a grade in which a special education or special needs student comes in, by law, we have to accept them. And so our special ed population runs about 12%, which is right about the norm for schools. There is sometimes a misnomer, and they even talked about it right there, that we are selective in our process. That's a yes and a no. Our contract with the state of Arizona says we won't put more than so many kids in our schools. We can't have more than so many kids in our charter, and we won't put more than so many kids in a classroom. So, for example, our cap is with the State Board of Charter Schools, we cannot have more than 700 students for all of our schools. So once we hit that cap, we can't take any more. We can't take any more students. Different than a district school, kids move into the area, whether they have 22 kids in the class or 32 kids in the class, they've got to put another kid in the class. So I think that might be where some of the misnomers come on special education. Once we hit the cap, you know, if they're special ed or not, we just are full and we can't take any more. But our percentage is about 40% currently of free or reduced, and about 12% for special education. Our minority is different in the communities that we serve. Chandler, in the Gilbert area, we are more affluent. And really here in Chandler, we have a very diverse population of students, especially with Intel in the area. And I would say that we have a wide range of, Ms. Thompson shaking her head, wide range of student demographics within the school here at Chandler. Did I get your question? Awesome, thank you.
I'd now like to introduce our speakers to take the lead. They're going to present us with a collaborative presentation, and then we'll go to Q&A.
Thank you so much. Let me begin by saying that I think Dr. Casteel wins the award for the most experience and the wisest person perhaps on the podium. And we talk with her frequently and try to seek her counsel for that reason. I want to thank the Chamber for doing this event, and really, there could be nothing more important than talking about public education, because we know that education really is what makes a strong community. And Chandler is an extremely strong community, very prosperous community, and I think it's because of the educational system that we have here. So today what we wanted to do was to collaborate, the three of us, because we thought if we did the same thing 3 times, that it would be deadly. So we put together some information. We'll each take a little piece of this, and I'll go ahead and get started. First of all, I'll be talking about demographics and achievement, and then Dr. Baca will be talking about financial information, very important to how we function. And then Dr. Casteel will be talking about our challenges and also talking about some myths that we know exist in education and trying to clear some of that up. So I'll begin with demographics. This is about the schools that we serve that are located in Chandler. And I think something that's important for people to understand, especially if you're from another state, districts serve Chandler. And then combined, we have a lot of schools in the city of Chandler. And they're all ranging from elementary through high school. And as stated earlier, we have many charter schools and many private schools in the area as well. And I think there's room for all of us because the need is great, and our students really need as much as we can possibly provide. As far as looking at the number of students, it's pretty large, 50,000 students combined that we serve. We have, when we're talking about free and reduced lunch rates, that's a figure we use to measure poverty, because we know that poverty is a factor in impacting learning and academic progress. And these figures are the schools that we serve that are in Chandler. They're not necessarily district figures, they are just the schools that are in Chandler. So for Chandler, it's 33%. That's for the entire Chandler Unified District. For Kyrene, we have 7 schools here. Our rate is about 14.5%, 14.25%, and then for Tempe Union, it's 12%. We are continuing to see this increase. And so as we look at changes in our community, we have to pay attention to this and make sure that we're doing everything we can to serve those students. It's so important. There's the ethnic breakdown of the 3 districts. And you know, I heard a police chief yesterday talking in a meeting I was in Tempe, and he was saying, you know, a lot of times people that have been in the community for a long time remember the community that they grew up in. And they think of the community as it was 20 or 30 years ago. And it's important to be realistic about our demographics and who we serve. And we believe that we can serve all children. It doesn't matter what their background is. And it doesn't matter if they come from out of boundary or out of state or anywhere else. We serve all students and we expect them to achieve at high levels. That gives us our breakdowns. One thing I think is always important when we do a presentation like this is to look around in the room and see if the room reflects what our population is. And I think it's important to make sure that we encourage people to participate in events like this because they need to have a voice in what we're doing in educating our students. As far as student achievement is concerned, we are highly successful districts. We've all received the rating of an A from the Arizona Department of Education. And I would have to say, and I'm sure both of my colleagues have stories like I do, I have parents frequently that seek me out and they tell me that they made a specific decision to buy a home in one of our neighborhoods because of our schools. We have people from all over the country that locate in this area because of the quality of the schools and we're very proud of that. We also have the business community that does the same thing. I know in serving on the Economic Development Council as a board member, at one time I was approached to talk to a business who was interested in locating here, interested in bringing their company to the state from another state. And they wanted to tour our schools and see what we offered, you know, and so we brought them to our schools. They loved what they saw, and they relocated here. So we have an impact on the economy as well. And then that speaks for itself, you know, so our students do very well. With that kind of result, we're never satisfied, however, and we know that the standards are becoming more rigorous. And we're going to have to rise to that challenge, and we're doing all kinds of things to be sure that we can meet that challenge and maintain this excellence that we have. High school seniors is another measure of progress and excellence. This is an amazing statistic, $93.9 million in scholarships. Students from Chandler have been able to get that kind of funding to support their higher education, which is a huge achievement, probably the highest in the state. And then the graduation rates are another measure, and they're also very high. So we want to maintain this. We want that actually to be 100%, but that's a very good number. Dropout rate is very low, and of course, too high if it's even one kid. And so let me turn this over now to my colleague, Dr. Baca, who will talk about the financial picture. Thank you very much.
I get the exciting portion of the presentation. I don't tweet, but if I could tweet, I would extend my appreciation to the Chandler Chamber for having us here today, and also especially to Superintendent Huppenthal for advocating that 3 of us keep our jobs. So, contract negotiations come up. So, Dr. Schauer presented demographics on schools that serve Chandler. However, the way in which funding works in Arizona, they don't go to the specific schools, but they come to the districts. Therefore, the financial information we present today are district level information. And as you can see in terms of our maintenance and operations budget, where Chandler's just over 208 million, Kyrene 104, and Tempe Union 78.5. This is the money that pays for salaries. It's going to average in every school district that about 85 to 87% of our maintenance and operations budget goes to salaries and benefits. Unrestricted capital outlay, it's unrestricted, which means that we can spend on out of this budget for maintenance issues, cleaning of schools, custodians, if we have overrides for technology. But it's unrestricted, so sometimes we can borrow from that money for a given year to help offset any losses we may have experienced in our maintenance and operations budget. When you look at operational efficiency, this comes from the Auditor General's report of fiscal year 2012. You'll see that your 3 districts, the average is less in per pupil spending than the state or national average. And when you talk about administration, we always get hit that we have too many administrators or administrative costs are too high. Well, in your Chandler schools, we have a lower total per pupil spending on administrators or administrative costs than the state or national average. We're also proud that we're able to offer a higher average salary to our teachers than the state average. And we're about at the same level of the state in terms of the teacher experience. So Dr. Castillo is going to let you know about the challenges we face, and I think she's turning over that portion, a portion of her presentation back to me, but I'll let her go. We call her Dane Casteel.
That's not what they call me. They have other names for me. I too would like to thank the Chamber and Superintendent Huppenthal. I do appreciate the plug for East Valley. And this might sound a little defensive, and we don't mean it to. We just think the community should have the facts. So here are some of the challenges we face. And I think a lot of it goes, we think of schools the way we all attended school. Your schools and we as a community face the challenges of overcoming many myths regarding public education, and we must overcome these myths in order to demonstrate that we are accountable and fiscally responsible. And in our case, the 3 of us, I think you would find that our districts are very accountable and fiscally responsible. The first myth is there's no accountability of Arizona public schools. But I just want to show you a few briefly. Over the last 2 years alone, these are the House bills that have been laid over a responsibility place. Special certification for teachers. We all get along well until we're fighting for an early childhood endorsed kindergarten teacher or a physics teacher for the math department. Then we take the gloves off. But then I win. management of school finances, intervention of poorly performing schools, school improvement plan and parent involvement, letter grade regulatory regulations. Here's some more: expansion of parental choice, scholarship accounts, teacher certification has become much more rigid, teacher and principal evaluations very much more structured, and it's amazing what we're going through now in terms of the training and the implementation of these new systems, and then student mastery of competency. So there is a lot of accountability. I think the most important accountability piece is that we all have elected school boards, elected by the citizens. People ask me, who are your bosses? And I said, well, I have 5. Well, how do you get to be a boss of a public school? I said, you have to go into an election. And I have to plug them. We have exceptional boards here in the East Valley, and I think they're the only public office that has. And they get no compensation like most other elected officials, and we do pay them mileage once in a while and let them go for chicken dinners at the Arizona School Board. The districts undergo scrutiny by the Arizona auditor, which reports on our finances and protocols, and we have more audits on various programs and finances than I would say any private business, maybe other than the banks now, but we have our share of oversight. Some of our unfunded mandates, and we used to talk years ago, I can remember when they mandated that we teach about AIDS education. We needed to teach kids about AIDS, and there was a movement to teach kids about exposure to sun and cause cancer. Well, here's some of the more serious ones: the Move On When Ready, Grand Canyon Diploma, Common Core Standards, the PARC assessment, teacher evaluation systems, the A through F label, and I do think that was an awesome mandate in comparison to the way they used to evaluate schools, because your A through F does speak to the community, and I think it does help the community understand the grade. But all these mandates saying you must do these things, but I'm sorry, we don't have any money for you. Many times the Florida is held up as a high standard for their reforms and how they are held accountable in the Florida schools. Arizona adopted the Florida standards, but they didn't give any money. And we're not trying to sound defensive. This is, what we say when we have breakfast and commiserate, drink our coffee. It is what it is. And we just say you just have to deal with it and move on, accept it as a challenge and figure your way around it. But this is what Florida does that Arizona doesn't do, that's related to the Florida standards. They fund their pre-K and full-day kindergarten. They fund professional development. They have a fund for teacher incentive and performance measures, flexibility in funding to improve student learning. They have more flexibility as their school districts. They have prioritized more than $700 million a year for struggling schools. And then the AP teacher bonus, which I think our advanced placement teachers would love to hear this, that up to 2,000, they have a cap of 2,000 for every passing student. They give $50 per student that passes the AP exam, and $500 per student if they're in a D or an F school. So they really did back up. That's the only place you get money when 87% of your budget is in salaries. That's teachers. That's people to mow the grass and counsel the kids. I think probably combined, we'd probably cut $60 to $70 million out of our prospective budgets during the economic crisis. Arizona has eliminated the funding for full-day kindergarten. We tightened our belt and made it happen. We had to. Those third grade standards are coming, and we need all the time we can give. They eliminated the funding for the JTED students, that's vocational education in former terms, about $29.7 million to the secondaries, to the Tempe Union and Chandler. They reduced soft capital and capital outlay revenue limit. That's how we repair our schools and buy our textbooks, computers, and all those kinds of things, $238 million. Suspended the inflationary factor, and you probably read a lot about this in the paper. and that's over $360 million. They just reinstated, but the future is uncertain. I think we did get 1.8% this year from the state legislature, but by the time they reduced other funds, I think it netted about $1 million in our case. Suspended the building renewal. We think this is pretty serious. When the state took over building the schools, they used the general fund to build and repair schools, and the agreement was they would give us building renewal to maintain those, and they have suspended that for a period of time. So the estimated cuts, just over $1 billion to your public schools in Arizona. University and colleges aren't exempt. According to the National Center, we have cut $550 million from our universities and community colleges. And according to the National Center for Educational Statistics, tuition has increased at an average of 63%. So it even becomes more important for us to give our kids a quality experience and allow them to earn scholarships and assist them in that venue. This is all very interesting. The whole country went through that economic crisis in 2008 on, and everybody suffered. I don't think anybody was held harmless. According to the National Center for Educational Statistics, Arizona ranked #1 in the percent of decrease in student spending. From 2008 to 2013, we experienced a 21.8% reduction in our funding, and again, that was equated $36 million to Chandler. According to the JLBC, and those are the Joint Legislative Budget Committee, decrease in per pupil funding from 2008 to 13 was 18.9%, which ranked us #4 in terms of the amount we took compared to the other states. Before the cuts, 2006-07, we ranked 50th nationwide, and education ranked us 50th nationwide. Now, the ranking Mr. Huppenthal was sharing with us was in terms of achievement. This is in terms of funding. And again, we don't mean to sound defensive. It is what it is. I think we're making a go of it. It just keeps me awake at night thinking what we could do with additional resources to reach every child. And the U.S. Census Bureau, after the cuts were made 2008, federal funding we were ranked 21st, with local funding 32nd. The state funding, we were ranked 48th. Total funding, we ranked 47th according to U.S. Census Bureau after the cuts. And I think I mentioned this. So how do the cuts, how do you do it? Camille, David, and Ken, so how'd you make it? You cut all this money, what happened? We have larger class sizes. We lost all-day kindergarten, but managed to fund it. And it was particularly important because third graders can't be promoted now unless they can read. And we believe that 2 hours in kindergarten a day isn't sufficient to get a child where they need to be. So we all bit the bullet, and it was on the backs of our teachers and other class sizes. We cut our basic supplies. The loss of highly qualified teachers was exceptional. I think one of the unintended results of the economic crisis and what we're going through right now, yeah, we can make it. But I think the profession will suffer over the next 10 years. It is so hard to get quality students to go to college and want to be a teacher, because your chances of getting beyond a $45,000 to $50,000 salary is pretty slim right now. You start out at $35,000, you're required to get a master's degree and buku credit hours out of college, go through tremendous hoops, and until we can improve our starting salary and compensate the best and brightest, it'll be a real struggle. So I think that's the unintended consequence. There have been school closures, in our case, restructuring, the loss of counselors, librarians, PE on art and music, and that's been a real tragic when we take a look at the loss of offerings, and increase in some student fees. That doesn't apply to all of us, but collectively the state has really gone through a battering just to keep the staff that we had here. I'm going to share with my colleague, he didn't get enough face time.
Thank you. I think you agree that you'd rather see her face than my face. You know, and then there's another myth that says our property taxes continue to increase, but the reality is they have dropped. If you look at the example A and example B of homeowners in Tempe, Union, Kyrene, and those in Chandler, you will see that the amount of money that they actually paid in property taxes declined since 2008. So if anyone says public schools are increasing their taxes, you can look to this as an example. And number 4, public schools have too many administrators and pay too much in administration, but let's look at the facts. First, let me clearly define what administrative costs are. Many times when we talk about administrative costs, we think it's administrators, but it's actually the cost that it takes to administer a district. And that includes payroll, human resources, business office, secretaries, and the like. And Arizona is the lowest in the nation in per pupil administrative cost according to the U.S. Census 2012 report. And if you recall the Auditor General's report, the national average per pupil in per administrative cost is just over $1,000, whereas Arizona's average is higher than your 3 districts' average. So let me conclude by saying what is our response to all of this. I think when you look at all the challenges we face, we don't look at our charter friends with Dr. Sippel that says we're competing for those dollars. It's what are we doing together to address the needs of our community? And I think our response is we need to continue to be accountable. Any of those things that were put up there in terms of unfunded mandates or accountability measures, we embrace that. We will continue to be accountable to our community. We want to continue to be efficient with our resources, keeping in mind what is best for kids. We also want to continue to offer choices within our districts. I think if there's one thing we can learn from our charter friends is that why can't we offer those same types of choices within a public education system? And we want to continue to build relationships so that we together are a community of learners. It does us no good to go about our business every day without taking the opportunity, as we have been given today, to share with you a perspective from public educators. Because, as Maria Montessori said, the hand is the instrument of the mind, the child the instrument of the future. And together we can make sure that our students, our children, and our community have a very bright future. On behalf of Dr. Castillo and Dr. Schauer, we thank you. We open it up for questions of any of the friends.
Got a question there in the back.
We can hear you.
Okay, I first just want to say, Dr. Camille, wow. Yeah, wow. You're awesome. Oh, well, thank you. So my question is really about safety and security. I didn't hear anything about that spoken of.
I was recently yesterday at a Tempe High School where I went in, and I was very happy to see that I was held at the front door. I was not allowed to go back. They took my ID this time, which typically they don't, even though they know me, and I had to wait for the resource officer
To come and check. So,
With that said, what's going on within the districts, all 3 of them, for added security in light of what's gone on
around the nation, and what are we doing here in Arizona
to keep our kids safe?
without having guns in the teachers' classrooms?
Safety is the #1 concern of all parents and ours, and it's a real challenge because I believe if someone wants to hurt someone, they're going to manage to do it, whether it's across the street from a parking lot. But in our case, we have security. We have security cameras in all schools. We've improved our fencing. We're seeking electronic card access to restrict access to our buildings. We're trying to force a single point of entrance at all our buildings, and it becomes a little more challenging when our schools are so open. 30 years ago, the concept, build a community school, no fences, everybody comes and everybody enjoys the facility that they paid for. Now we're putting up more fences. We're hoping, if we're successful in November, that we will hire security personnel for all our elementary schools, which right now don't have any, to assist them in looking at the properties. We're looking at a mass notification system. We have very extensive plans from a district, a local school level, and I think you would find that in most of us do tremendous planning with the local police.
You know, I just want to add a moment to that. I think we all do a very great job. If there's an incident, then we'll be able to react to it. But please keep in mind, our effort is to try to prevent it from happening. And when you look at cuts that take place with guidance counselors, when you look at cuts that take place with social workers, psychologists, you're looking at cuts that may prevent a tragedy from occurring because we want to identify students who may be troubled. And we want to identify that and be able to provide the services that they need.